Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make realistic shadows in Adobe Photoshop. Sometimes when you have an image, like this one that I've picked out from a free stock photography website, sometimes the subject or a part of the image doesn't actually have a shadow. It might be due to the time of the day, when the picture was taken. Maybe it was around noon and the sun was coming more straight down and there's really little shadow. But you might want to add one, and this is a good technique to use. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. As you can see, I already have 3 layers set up here. The first thing that you want to do is that you'll have your background layer. You want to make a copy of that. So what you can do is you can take that background layer and drag it down into your new layer button, or you can press Control J on your keyboard and that'll make a copy of your layer. And as you can see, I have these two copies. And the reason that I make a copy is just so that I have an original layer that I can work from. And I've kind of done a little bit of overkill there because I actually have 2 background copies, but that can be useful too, and I'll show you why in a little bit. The next thing that you want to do is make a well, if you want to do it like I did, you'll make another copy of it and go ahead and just cut out the object that that you want to make a shadow on. So this windsock is what I want to make my shadow on, so I cut that out. And as you can see, I added a layer mask there and I cut it out in Photoshop. And I'll go ahead and I'll put a link to my video on how to do that, how to cut out objects in Photoshop for you guys too, in case you don't know how. So okay, so I have this this layer that's just this windsock. I'll go ahead and take the so that you can only view that layer, and that's just to make it easier for you guys. So I have that, and that's on top here. So what I want to do now is I have that layer selected, the layer that I have cut out, and I'm going to go ahead and actually copy that layer. So I'll press Control J on my keyboard and I'll make a copy of that layer. And now what you want to do is you want this to be you don't want there to be a mask on this layer. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to go up to the top to Layer, down to Smart Objects, and you're going to convert it to a smart object. And then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to go up to Layer, down to Rasterize, and you're going to go ahead and just rasterize that layer because you don't really need to rasterize it, but pretty much what we're doing is just turning it back into a Photoshop pixelated image, and it doesn't need to be a smart object for this. And I think it takes up a little less file space if you convert it back into a raster. So okay, so now we have these 2 layers. As you can see, if I toggle on and off the view, they're exactly the same right now. What we want to do with this copy that we just made, and I'm just going to rename it Shadow, because that's actually going to be our shadow. And so since it is our shadow, we're going to take it and move it behind this top layer. So what we want to do is we want to double click on that layer, and that's going to bring up your layer styles. And what you want to do is you want to do a color overlay. So you're going to click on color overlay, the checkbox next to it, and then click on color overlay itself, and set that to a dark gray or black. And then click OK and click OK. As you can see, if you toggle off the view of that one, you'll of your image there, you'll have a black copy that you just made. So what we want to do now is kind of blur the edges a little bit. So we'll go up to Filter, down to Blur, and do a Gaussian blur. And you can kind of do this as much as you want, but keep in mind you know, that you want to make it realistic. So I'm going to do something about like this. You can kind of go off that if you want, or do it to your own tastes. I'll press OK. And then what I'll want to do is go ahead and activate some of these other layers. So now I have my background layer activated again. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to get that shadow down on the ground where it should be, and I'm thinking I'm going to lay it down somewhere over here. When you're doing this, keep in mind where the light is hitting things. It might look like it's coming in from the left a little bit, so I'm thinking I'm going to put the shadow down kind of somewhere over here. So what I want to do is I want to select my shadow layer that we just made that's behind this image here. So I'm going to select that shadow layer and I'm going to go up to Edit, down to Transform, and to Distort. And I'm going to just do this so I can get it pretty much. Distort will let you move this kind of however you want to. Kind of, you can change the perspective and you can kind of shrink it or extend it however you want. And I think I'm going to just kind of distort it a little bit like this. And something kind of like that's, I think, what I'm going to want. So I'm going to go ahead with that. And I'll just double click to apply that. And then as you can see that this shadow is kind of coming underneath the image a little bit. You kind of want it coming off of the back of it there, like just like that. So there you go, there's that. As you can see, it's still really strong. So what I'm going to want to do is select that shadow layer and just take the opacity down a little bit, probably to 75 or so. And that's looking pretty good. So you can kind of see through the shadow a little bit onto the ground, and it looks a lot more realistic. The edges are still pretty hard, so I think what I'll do is I'll go back up to Filter, and I'll add a little bit more of that Gaussian blur. And it looks like if I add another 7.6 pixels, that's going to be about where I want it. But as you can see, you kind of lose some of the in-between parts there, so if you want to keep those, just make that blur a little bit less. Maybe around 5 or 6. Okay, so there we go. You've made a shadow by copying layers using your color overlay and distorting it. There's another thing that you can also use too if you want for the perspective of it. It's just a tool. It's Edit down to Transform and Perspective, and that can kind of change the perspective of the shadow. So if you want to make it look extended and you don't really want to make the shadow too much bigger, you can use that perspective tool to do that. And that's about it. So I hope you've learned a lot from this tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave a comment and I'll certainly answer those for you. But thanks for watching. Please follow me on Twitter and like me on Facebook, and please like me on YouTube if you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you very much.